Hi there, Doc from Barcast Audio here, today to talk with you about my honest advice for somebody just starting law school. Law school can be very hectic, especially at the beginning. You're kind of jumping into uncharted waters. I want to give you my honest advice that will help you get started on the right path as you're beginning the law school process. Before we get started, be sure to subscribe to this channel for more of these videos. Check us out at barcastaudio.com. Our law school mastery program has audio outlines, essay attack sheets, regular printable outlines for you for your law school classes, everything you need to crush the law school exams, to crush the first semester. Be sure to check us out at barcastaudio.com. So the first piece of advice I have for anyone starting law school is that suffering is a choice in law school. You don't have to be this, oh my gosh, I'm doing law school, I can't possibly function in a real society anymore person. A lot of people ultimately do opt for that. They completely withdraw from their social groups, from their families, because they feel the immense pressure of the law school experience. But you don't have to be that way. You don't necessarily need to really enter your bunker until later in the semester. Certainly it is very stressful. Certainly there is a lot being asked of you early in the semester, but the commitment that is sort of advertised with law school is not really required so much in terms of really hunkering down and not socializing until we get deeper into the semester and start approaching final exam season. On top of that, you don't necessarily need to wear the constant studying required and the sort of struggles of law school on your sleeve in a way that repels other people. You still need people, you still need your community, because law school is a really stressful experience, and I really strongly suggest that you do not opt to suffer through this alone. Do your best to understand the context of law school, understand that it ultimately is still just school. While your future may be riding on it in many contexts, you still have to be a person on the other side of it, and you still have to be a human being and not just a law student. So don't allow yourself to fall into the trappings of thinking that this is a really painful suffering experience, that there's nothing to be done on that front. Next up, my second piece of advice for somebody starting law school is do not waste too much time briefing cases. This is my number one tip to everyone who goes to law school. People get consumed with the idea of briefing cases. They get consumed with how important they think that process is. And ultimately, I'm sorry to tell you, it really is not that important. It's a useful skill in terms of synthesizing material in a relatively quick amount of time, but it's not the most useful thing for actually scoring well on exams and actually making the most out of your time. We'll talk about this a little bit later, but ultimately, nobody's grading you on how great your case briefs are. You may flub a cold call, even if you do a great case brief. Case briefs are really about anxiety management for most people because they don't want to be embarrassed in a large lecture hall. So if you can just simply stomach the idea that, hey, I don't need to commit 2.5 hours every night to briefing my cases. I can book brief, I can do something, I can take quick notes, and that's going to probably be a more useful use of my time than necessarily briefing these in these long, elaborate briefs. If you can get in that mindset and still be comfortable and understand the idea that ultimately cold calls don't matter that much in the grand scheme of life, then you will be better off. So keep that in mind as you're first entering the semester. Next up, remember how you're being graded. Ultimately, all that matters in law school is final exams. Sometimes maybe you have a midterm, but for the most part, the exams are all that matters. Nobody cares how much you're raising your hand. Sometimes professors put you can get additional extra credit for raising your hand. I don't know why they put that, because it only leads to people being highly annoying and asking irrelevant, I don't want to say stupid, but sometimes stupid questions, and it is not a good proactive use of anyone's time. So remember, early on in the semester, that the final exam is the only thing that really matters here. So if you enter with that mindset, you need to be preparing for that final exam from day one. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean, oh my gosh, you need to start studying right now. You just have to keep it in the back of your mind that the case briefs, the readings, everything is a part of a larger context, about a part of a larger understanding you're eventually going to have of the law. So keep that in mind early in the semester. Remember that as you get deeper into the semester and the exams start to become more of a realistic sort of thing instead of just this vague idea far off from you. Keep in mind that you are really only being graded on your final exam. For the most part, that's going to be 100% of your grade in a lot of these courses. So keep that in mind early on. Next up, remember, community is important. Too often, law students enter law school maybe with the idea that they don't necessarily need to make friends. They don't necessarily need to dive into the social element of it. They don't want to be a part of sort of this high school light atmosphere. So they kind of keep to themselves and they withdraw and they struggle through whatever they're struggling through throughout the semester, tough courses, bad cold calls on their own. They don't want to engage with their classmates at that level. I strongly, strongly advise you against this. Even if you're just making one or two people who you're really like getting along with socially, you need to have some sense of community in law school because it's useful to have someone to bounce ideas off of, to have someone to bounce your struggles off of. It's very easy to be isolated in law school. Very, very easy. Do not do that. Do your best to form some sense of community. Now, by the same token, that doesn't mean that this has to be sort of a high school situation where you have your little clique and you don't really want to talk to other people. Too often people get involved in those kind of situations as well. And while community is certainly important, it is not everything in terms of law school. It is a useful thing to have people in some sort of study group and have, or at the very least, have people that you can talk to about class. That doesn't mean that you have to have a study group. Doesn't mean that you have to have some sort of group that you're meeting with every week to go over everything. Sometimes students get a little too overzealous with this notion. What I really mean is to have somebody, at least one person that you can connect with and talk about what's going on, your experiences through law school, because like I said, it's very easy to feel isolated throughout this experience. Next up, don't study from the case briefs, study from your notes. Too often, students begin briefing cases and they use those case briefs as the basis for their notes in class. The problem is, students are very often not very good at briefing cases. So they're poisoning the larger operation here by combining their class notes with these not good case briefs. So have your case briefs separate and apart from your class notes. Your class notes are what the professor is going to say, how he or she is going to contextualize the information that's going to be on the final. So don't combine that with whatever your case briefs may be, because a lot of times, unfortunately, when you first start law school, you're not going to understand what's really important about a lot of these cases. That's going to be something the professor reveals to you by way of Socratic method very often, but don't mix up the issues here by combining your class notes with your case briefs. Study off of your class notes because that's ultimately what the professor is prioritizing and what you need to prioritize when you're making your outlines and you're actually studying for exams. Next up, don't get discouraged early. It's very easy to feel very overwhelmed by the process of law school early on. You're looking at the sheer volume of pages you're expected to read every day, and it can feel like, I can't possibly do this. I cannot stay on top of all this material. Try your best to not get discouraged. Try your best to cut corners where you can and learn that. And obviously it's going to be a little bit of a rough process because you don't necessarily know where you can cut corners and where you can't. But that's going to be something you're going to have to figure out as you progress through the semester because the sheer volume of reading required of you is going to be, it's easy to sort of wear out and burn out as we get deeper into the semester. And there is this allure as you first begin law school, I have to do everything. I have to be on top of every little thing. And use resources like Barcast Mastery Program, like Quimby, like whatever else may be out there and accessible to you to allow you to cut corners to the best of your ability and not feel the constant strain, constant hamster wheel of staying on top of every reading, every lecture, and needing to sort of feel that pressure constantly. Now, the final bit of advice that I'd give to anyone starting law school is do what you can to maintain your sense of self. And what do I mean when I say this? Very often, law students begin the law school experience thinking that they are smart, competent people. And too frequently, because of the nature of law school, the competitive nature, the curve, where students who have received A's their entire lives are suddenly receiving C's on exams, they sort of lose their sense of self. They start to doubt themselves. They lose their self-confidence. They get really hard on themselves because they are students who have excelled throughout most of their academic lives. They're not used to struggling like this. But try to remember throughout the law school process that you entered this entire process, law school, thinking you were a smart, capable person. And no matter what happens, no matter whether you finish the top of the class, the bottom of the class, middle of the class, you're still going to be a smart, competent person, even if your law school grades don't necessarily reflect that. I know so many people who were ranked higher than me in law school who struggled on the bar exam. And that was something, an area sort of where I really connected. So it may be that you're struggling with something within law school and ultimately down the line you're going to really connect and get it all together and you'll score really well in the bar exam. You'll be a great attorney. Keep in mind that this is a long marathon of an experience. Law school itself, the bar exam, becoming a lawyer, it is an entire world out there. And in the moment, on a week-to-week, day-to-day basis, it's very easy to get swept up in the idea that I'm not good enough to be here, I'm not smart enough to be here. You knew you were smart enough to be here when you first started. You understood that. Don't let doubt creep in. keep it under control, keep your sense of self, and do your best to go through the semester confident that you can get it done. That does it for us here. Be sure to check us out at barcastaudio.com. Our mastery program has audio outlines, regular printable outlines, everything you need to do well in law school. Check us out at barcastaudio.com. Until later, I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye now.